The sun does a lot more than sit in the sky and shine all day long. You won't believe the level of detail you could see looking through these two telescopes. We're looking at the sun safely, up next on Night Sky Voyager. The sun is incredibly bright, and if you've ever looked at it with just your eyes before, you'll know you can only look at it for a moment before you're wincing in pain. Looking at the sun through a telescope takes even more light and focuses it very intensely, and observing the sun without proper protection can make you go blind instantly. But there is some equipment that you can use that will allow you to look at the sun directly and safely. Today, we're going to talk about some of the options that you have. The first option is to essentially put very intense sunglasses right onto any regular old nighttime telescope. These come in two styles, glass and film. This giant glass one is for my C11, and this film one here goes on this 6-inch refractor that I have behind me. What's cool about these is you can just hold them up to the sun and stare right at it and get really sharp views out of it. It's really neat to see how perfectly spherical the sun is. Another thing that you might notice is that the different materials on these cast different colors. This glass filter gives the sun a very nice yellowish color, whereas this film filter gives it kind of a whitish tint. When you're looking at the sun with one of these kind of filters on your telescope, what you can see essentially is the surface of the sun and any sunspots or dark, cooler spots of the sun that are caused by magnetic fluctuations. They're also what you would usually be using if you were going to be observing an eclipse with your telescope. It's really a cool view, and these film ones can be especially affordable, so I would recommend getting one for your telescope if you don't have it yet. This one from Kendrick actually even has a solar finder on it, and I'll show you how to use that in a second, but these are really simple to put on. You just place them over the main aperture of your telescope and make sure that they are tightened down. You want to make sure that it's on there securely, because if you're looking at the sun, you don't want to risk the chance of having it blow away and have your eyes looking directly at the sun. But these are very safe. Sometimes you'll see people put tape around them. This one, once you get the screws tightened on, is very secure, and I feel safe using it. If you look up towards the front, you can see this solar finder here, and you'll see as I move it, you can see the shadow that gets cast on it, and that white dot there is going to be the sun. So all we have to do is get that lined up in there, and the sun should be right in the eyepiece or very close. If you don't have a solar finder available and you're having a hard time finding the sun, just turn around and look at your shadow on the ground. My telescope is not aligned up right now, but what you'll want to do is turn it so that the shadow of your telescope is as small as it could be and looks like it's lined up. And that will get you reasonably close, at least a lot closer than if you're trying to spot it with your naked eye. I'm just using a simple 20mm colossal here. You don't need anything fancy, and I think for me personally, wide field views of the sun usually look the best. It's a large object, and it's nice to get the whole full disk of it in there, at least in these white light telescopes. But if you want to do some fine observing of sunspots, you can certainly go up to a higher magnification eyepiece. Let's see what we can see. So right now, what I can see is near the limb of the sun is one sunspot, and also we've got a large sunspot pattern coming across the front, as well as one lone one out to the side. I'm also picking up a little bit of chromatic aberration. This is an achromatic refractor, and so I'm getting some purple fringing on the sun, but it's not affecting the views at all. It's really a pleasant view to see, and it's fun to take a look at the sunspots as they are changing all the time. There's another piece of gear that you can use for observing the sun in white light called a Herschel wedge, and it's essentially a series of filters and a prism that takes a small portion of the light and directs it to your eye and the rest out the bottom. I've never looked through one of these, but they're supposed to have very pleasing views, but they can be very expensive, and these film and glass filters work really well, and so I just prefer to use those. If you've ever had a chance to observe the sun through a Herschel wedge, let me know in the comments how that looked different from the views that you might get through a glass or film solar filter. This little telescope is quite a bit different than that one. While it is a small refractor, it is not a telescope that you can use at night at all. It is a hydrogen alpha solar telescope, and it's only for looking at the sun. The image that it presents to you, though, is dramatically different and very exciting. This is perhaps one of the most used telescopes in my collection because you could take it out anytime you have a sunny day, look up, and be treated to something totally different. If you haven't watched my video that I filmed at the Adler Planetarium yet, you should check it out. I get to see a telescope from Josef von Fraunhofer. Fraunhofer is famous for discovering the Fraunhofer lines, which are spectroscopy, and what it essentially is showing the chemical makeup. It's a way to show the chemical makeup of any star in the sky. They look at it through a special filter, and it breaks out into lines called Fraunhofer lines that you can then use as a key to identify what the chemical makeup of that star is. This telescope is applying that principle and showing us the spectral lines of hydrogen alpha, which is a very specific form of hydrogen that is found in the chromosphere of the sun. What's neat about that is this is where all of the activity on the sun occurs, and this telescope allows you to peek through the brightness and see a variety of details on the sun that you can't see with a white light telescope. This telescope uses an optical technology called an etalon. It's housed right here, and this specific telescope, you can adjust the etalon with this knob here. Some others have a big knob that comes off the side, but they essentially function the same way. And what they are is a very, very narrow band filter that only allows those hydrogen alpha lines to pass. When you adjust it, it lets you go through the different layers of detail that you see. And so when you're observing the sun with one of these, you may sometimes want to adjust the etalon so that you could see different features more brightly. These telescopes block over 99% of the light coming from the sun, and since it's very specific to that one hydrogen alpha line, you get really unique views out of it. The image in it is got a red color, but it lets you see all the features of the sun in great detail. This telescope is made by Lunt out of Arizona in the United States, and I've added onto here a TeleVue Sol Finder, which is essentially the same kind of solar finder that you'll see on that Kendrick that I had up there. It functions the same way. I also got this nifty sunscreen here from Scope Stuff, and what it does is blocks out the sun from your face when you're looking at the eyepiece. It's a really useful piece to have. And again, for this setup, I'm using a 20mm colossal. You don't need any fancy eyepieces for this. You can actually use any eyepiece that you have in your collection, as long as it's 1.25" format. Let's see what we can see today. So the sun here is a bright reddish ball. I can see very prominently the sunspots that we saw in the white light filter, but in addition to that, there's a lot of other detail there. We'll talk in a minute about some of the features that you might be able to see when you're observing the sun through a hydrogen alpha telescope. One thing worth noting about the sun is that it goes through cycles of maximums and minimums, and there's about 11 years in between both of them. Right now in 2026, we're around a maximum, and so the sun is very, very active. When I first bought this telescope, probably about 7 years ago or so, we were around a minimum, and I would go out every day with it and see almost nothing. Sunspots, anything. I was lucky then if I even saw one little prominence, but over time, as the sun has become more and more active towards solar maximum, you can look at it every day and it's a totally different experience. You never know what you're going to find on it. Another thing about the sun is that it changes in real time. You can actually observe the changes on it and its features as the day goes on. One thing I like to do is set this up maybe on a Saturday morning and observe for a little bit first thing in the morning. I'll go out, do some chores, and I'll come back and take a look again, and it is a totally different view. The sunspots may have moved a little bit, but even more importantly is that the prominences have dramatically changed. Sometimes you'll have big arcs appear, sometimes they will be there and then they flatten out and disappear. It is constantly changing and it's always in movement. And the other interesting thing is that many of these prominences that you see on the limb of the sun are many times the size of Earth. The sun is so far away and so incomprehensibly large that these flares that seem so tiny coming off of it dwarf our own planet. It's absolutely incredible to think about. And because you can use this telescope anytime that it's sunny out, this is actually one of my most used telescopes. I have it outside pretty regularly throughout the nice season here, and I get a lot of joy out of taking a look at the sun throughout the day. So let's take a look at some pictures that I took right at the eyepiece today. As a note, I took these pictures directly at the eyepiece with my Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, and I was using the Move Shoot Move tri-adapter, which I featured in another video. You can pick one up on Amazon.com. I'll put an affiliate link for it in the description. This is about as much astrophotography as I'm willing to dabble in, though. So let's take a look at some of these pictures. And I'd like to note that especially on some of these white light photos, you may see a couple grayish blobs on there, some artifacts. Those were either dust on my eyepiece or on my camera lens. I forgot to wipe it off. This is through the 6-inch refractor with the white light film filter. And what we're looking at here is the disk of the sun. What a white light filter will show you is the sun's visible surface. And the main thing that you'll notice is sunspots. Sunspots are a darker, cooler region of the sun, and it's caused by magnetic activity in that area. And they look dark because it's cooler than the area that is around it. And the other thing that I like to notice, especially in these, besides just noticing sunspots, and you'll see this in both hydrogen alpha and white light, but you can also notice the spherical shape of the sun. It doesn't look totally flat. If you look out towards the edges, you can see it kind of dims, and I think it's pretty cool that it gives it the view of some shape, and it's not just a big flat disk in the sky. I think it's a really pleasant view, and I think also when you zoom in on the sunspots, you can see that they are darker and lighter regions of them, and it's a pretty fascinating view, and it's always changing, especially dynamic during times of solar maximum. Now we're going to switch over to some of these hydrogen alpha views, and you'll immediately notice some big differences here. Again, like I mentioned, this is the chromosphere of the sun, and it reveals the more active and dramatic solar features. The first thing that'll probably stick out to you is this granulation that is all across the surface of the sun. And those are temperature differences in areas of the sun. And think about it like it's convection zones, and think about it like if you've ever cooked a pot of oatmeal on the stove, you get some areas where you get bubbles where it's hotter, and cooler areas. It's a very similar effect all across the surface of the sun, and you can only see that in hydrogen alpha. Now, what people really like to look at are these prominences. These are these bright arcs or loops or clouds off the limb of the sun here, and it's solar gas that is being released from the sun. And they're best seen across the limb, but you can also see these things called filaments, and it's essentially the same feature as a prominence, only you're getting it from more or less a bird's eye view, and I was able to capture one here today as well. You can see it here. When you're looking at it, or when I'm describing it to people who've never looked through a telescope before, I tell them that it almost looks like there is a hair on the lens. That's the best way I think I would describe it. But in a nutshell, these are the same thing, you're just viewing them at a different angle. Another thing that you're going to see is something called a spicule, and these are these tiny spikes or jets that are along the edge of the sun. They make the sun's limb, this edge here, look hairy or fuzzy, and you'll almost always be able to spot those. And that's something, especially in hydrogen alpha, that will stick out to you, is that the edge of the sun is not flat or smooth at all. It's quite rough. Another thing that I like to do is if you Google the words GONG and H alpha, it will take you to the National Solar Observatory page that shows real-time solar images from observatories around the world. You can see them in grayscale and in color, and you'll need to note, it'll tell you on there which observatory it is and when that picture was taken. Some will be several hours ago, but others will be within a few minutes, and it gives you a good chance to check to see if there's anything interesting happening on the surface of the sun before you haul your telescope outside and go observing. While the sun is at solar maximum or approaching it, it's generally there's always something to see out there, but I would use this resource a lot when we were at minimum, because some days you would go out and there wouldn't be anything to see at all, and so it was a good opportunity for you to go check it out beforehand. And if you just want to go see what the sun looks like in H-alpha without dragging a telescope out, that's also a wonderful resource. I hope this video has inspired you to start looking at the sun, whether it be with a film or glass filter on your regular nighttime telescope or with a hydrogen alpha telescope here. One thing is for sure, having the capability to observe the sun dramatically increases the amount of time that you can get out observing. If you found this video interesting, please subscribe to my channel or consider joining as a channel member. This is Trevor from Night Sky Voyager. Thanks for watching.